Well, hi everybody, and welcome to another interview. I love interviewing independent creatives, and today, instead of a writer, we've got an artist and illustrator, Rhiannon Thomas, who I've worked with before on Milk and Cookies last year. So Rhiannon, would you like to tell us all about what you do?
Yeah, okay. So like I said, I'm Rhiannon. I work in two halves. I like to kind of split myself down the middle. So I work as a children's book illustrator, but also work in fine art as well. So I kind of like to do a little bit of both. There was a time when I kind of just did the fine art and thought, no, this is definitely what I'm going to do. But then I missed illustration. I missed the process of working with authors and how kind of charming children's books are. So I kind of went the other way and I thought I'll just work with these. But as it turns out, I need both. So I do a nice balance, and I have it's quite nice. I can work on both projects at the same time.
Well, I mean, that works really well for us who need you to illustrate our book. And so I know you've got a background in archaeology. So how did you get into art and illustration?
That's what's quite nice is actually that over the years I've managed to kind of amalgamate everything together. So I've always loved art since I was, you see, I think we've both got kids, obviously, and the little ones, and they're kind of the colouring in constantly and drawing. And I was doing that on the walls and everything else, probably older than I should have been. So I've always had a love of art, but I've always had a love of archaeology. And I remember being, I think I was about 10 and watching a program on Egypt. And I said to my father, that's what I'm going to do one day. I'm going to be an Egyptologist. I'm going to work it. And I did do that, but went on to British and European archaeology. But the love of art never kind of left. It always stayed. So what I found that I could do is that when I went into archaeology, I went to art college first. So I kind of did that part. I thought that art college was going to prepare me, let me have a little bit of time before while I prepared for university, but I should have done it the other way around because art college was so much more intense than university was anyway. So I kind of I'd been to art college and I studied illustration, and then I went on to university and did Egyptology, and then did my master's in archaeology. So sorry, I'm just from the side. I'm just getting a cup of tea passed to me. I just kind of went from there. But when I worked in the field then as an archaeologist, I found that there was a real need for archaeological illustrators. So even though it's not the same kind of thing, I guess, as children's book illustration, and it's not as free because everything is quite technical. In fact, it is really technical drawing. You're recording things like pottery and artifacts and any of the bodies that we found. So that was a nice opportunity to be able to kind of push the two together. But it kind of worked for and against. It allowed me to kind of delve into that creative side, but at the same time, you couldn't be creative because it had to be exact, because these are all for research papers and reference and things like this. So you can't use artistic license and just think, oh, I'm just going to draw a couple more bits and pieces off that bit of pottery. And so it was lovely to be able to do it, especially recording a lot of there was Roman skeletons that we found, and that was lovely. But it just kind of reminded me that I needed to be a little bit more creative because everything in archaeology is very, I suppose it's very process driven. It has to be perfect. We can record everything, but so yeah, it allowed me to touch on it, but at the same time, it was just calling me back just to be a little bit more free, a little bit more creative with it.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Excuse me. Because similarly, I went into science and then felt the need for more creativity. And although I worked as a teacher for a long time, and I'm back in the classroom now, and that offers a certain amount of creativity, I think that when you have that need for a creative outlet, it's just something that you kind of can't let go.
Yeah.
I'm interested then in, I mean, normally at this point I would ask an author what books they've written, which is obviously a more tricky question for you. So tell me a little bit about the work that you've been doing lately, or some significant pieces.
Okay, well, I was going to say I haven't actually written it. I did a thesis, if that helps. Yeah, so recently actually from when I worked on your book, which I've lost track of when.
Should have had it years up, shouldn't I?
I'm just looking on my shoulder to see if my bookshelf I can reach it. yeah, so after that, then I've been working on a few other kind of children's books with other authors as well. I can't actually say too much about those, unfortunately, as you well know, because obviously they're not published yet. But I've gone in from a fine art perspective. I've kind of decided to do an Icelandic series. So I've kind of moved into that. Now, the pieces that I do create, I like to make things complicated for myself, overly complicated. So instead of just using paint, then I've gone to using my own pigment. So I've got like lots of little pots around where my desk full of random bits and pieces and soils and different things to hand. And I collect all these different pigments from different places and actually get other people to do it for me as well. My dad's a Monroe bagger, so he brings back a lot of pigment from on top of Monroes in Scotland, and there's river clays and all bits and pieces, and I dry those out over a few weeks and then use them and mix them into my work. So everything is very textured, and I quite like the idea that you've kind of pulled together loads of different places from the UK and created something for it. And I'd love to use foreign pigment, but I think there's a legal restriction with that. You're not allowed to bring.
No idea.
Yeah. So I've been working on an Icelandic series, and I've kind of fallen into. It's gone from being more abstract, and now I fall into almost drone shots. So the images from obviously looking down over the coastline, and I've kept that kind of. I've always been a coastal artist, but I've kept that coastal kind of perspective into it. So I've just finished it, and I thought I was ready to finish, and then it was the day that I finished the last piece of the series, and I thought, right, I'm done. I'm going to move on to something else. That I was bombarded on social media with these amazing photographs. I'm thinking, I've got about another 10 pieces I could have done. I've left it. I've packed that one. That's done and dusted. I've got to move on now.
Because your fine art pieces are quite abstract, aren't they? Really. Whereas your illustration work is, I suppose, a little bit more traditional, maybe, in that you're sort of working with watercolor rather than pigments and things, and they're a bit more, less abstract, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the quite nice thing about having the two. I mean, we spoke just now about when you work in sciences and things like this, and you've got this hankering for needing to be creative, and the same with me in archaeology. And I think with as much I love illustrating children's books, there's a wonderful kind of freedom, and it's like you're almost always in that Alice in Wonderland world. You can make most things happen, but at the same time, then everything is. I like to work in the old school way, so nothing is digital. I think I'd be used to doing any digital art, so it is just the kind of the paper and the watercolors and things like that. But the fine art then lets me loosen up again, so loosen up that kind of process. So it's nice that I beat myself up for ages thinking, oh, maybe I should be one or the other. You've got to have, but there isn't any rules in art.
Yeah, you don't have to be one specific thing. I've got the originals, they're just over there for Milk and Cookies. And the fear when you sent those, it was just that they would make it and everything would be okay. And then I wouldn't manage to, I don't know, completely destroy them while I was opening them. But they are absolutely beautiful. I'm going to have to put one up somewhere because they just deserve to be out.
Well, I had that from this perspective as well. Once they were finished, it's like, right, they're done. And I packaged them up and I sent them off. I think it was by like a guaranteed next day or some kind of delivery that was secure. And as soon as you said you had them, I thought, right, that's it.
But then you put a note to the postman. I really hope it made the postman laugh. I forget, you wrote something like, I'm fragile and aren't we all, or something across the top of it.
Yeah, that's right. I think, dear Mr. Postman, please look after me. I'm fragile, aren't we all, eh? Have a lovely day.
Oh, it really made me laugh. So for anyone who's watching this, I appreciate that a lot of my audience will be writers. So I'm sorry if these are kind of obvious questions for someone who's an artist, but I thought people would be interested in, as an independent artist, how you sort of publish your work. I know it's not the same, but how do you find your audience? How do you, sell your work, actually get it out there? I'm just sort of interested in that process.
I mean, you've got the normal kind of the normal avenues, which is when you imagine artists, of course, there's galleries. And though everything has changed a little bit since, I won't mention the names in the last few years, let's just say.
Yeah.
But so everything kind of changed and things closed down. So a lot of them, it was kind of a case of, withdrawing your work back out for the time being and putting it in storage. But yeah, I use galleries, as you'd imagine anyway. But for me, I know it can get a really bad rap at times, so I love social media, but I never get the opportunity to go on it from I guess, a personal perspective, from a private perspective. So I use Instagram. I'm heavy on Instagram because I love the stories. I love that you can constantly just show what you're doing. I mean, I'm sure people are, they either love it or they're sick of seeing me on there, but I can add everything, the process of the work and the paint.
And aesthetic. Your work just lends itself. Your Instagram is just beautiful. I love it.
And I think that's the lovely part about it as well, is you can put everything kind of on there, because now it's so kind of colourful. And I was on Facebook a lot, and I still am, because you've got the groups and then you've got the business page. So you have to kind of look at it from a business head, I suppose, perspective. They're great too, but I think the reason that I don't need to have a private page is because when I'm on social media, I don't cover anything up. So I am, other than watching my language, maybe I am exactly as I am normally, and I can put everything out there then. But from a selling perspective, or selling myself, I think social media is brilliant for that, because especially if you look at it from the way I like to see social media is, and especially I think I've tried to explain this to artists that are starting up, or illustrators, whatever kind of art form you do, see social media as a party. So if you invite your account, if you invite people to your party, then you've got to turn up for it as well. So if you're inviting everybody in, getting them to like your page or follow you, and then you're absent from it, or you speak to them differently from what they know you to be, or you're a little bit too maybe distant, or you're trying to be too professional and too kind of clean and down the line, then they're going to leave. They're not going to be interested in getting involved and joining in with that kind of party. And I think that's, in my head at least, that's a good way of looking at it. So I think if I'm putting content on constantly, and I love to show people, there's no one here that can tell me to stop talking, which is a great thing. I can go all day long just chatting away, and then they can kind of flick through whatever they feel.
My husband watches mine, and so that he can see sort of what I've been working on during the day. He's like, "Oh, you did that today." It's hilarious. He watches my stories. And this is probably a good opportunity to mention the fact that you also have a podcast on creativity, and you're a coach as well.
Yes. So I love, the podcast is The Art of Positivity, and that is kind of surrounded not just around art, but around, I guess, the idea of positivity. So lots of different things I get in. I think the best way to describe it is there's a reason that art is used as a therapy. You've got having expressing your creativity from any way, whether you're a ceramicist or a painter or an author, however you express your creativity. I think every single person in the world needs that outlet. And when they tell me, "Oh, I'm not creative at all," I'm like, "Oh, but you are," and you've just got to allow yourself. Because a lot of the time, the run-up answer to that is, "Oh, I'm not really creative at all." I remember I used to love pottery when I was in school, and I'm thinking, well, that's it. You've just got to find, don't just try jumping into something. I know a lot of people will, it was somebody I was coaching, and she referred to me, said, "Oh, but I can't do it like you can." And I think, well, I've been doing it every day for the last 10 years. That's why I can do what I can do. But also she is amazing at creating these kind of soft animals, and I would never be able to touch that, be able to do that. And
you don't have to be good at something to enjoy it, or like you said, to get the therapy from it.
Yes, and I think that's the thing as well. And a lot of the time, which is why I always say to people with sketchbooks, there's a woman I'm coaching at the moment, and I'm speaking to her about the same thing. She rips pages out constantly. "Oh, it's not perfect." And I'm going, "It's a sketchbook." It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to, if you can scribble a few things down, or you can make it look like a piece of art, a masterpiece. But it's about having that releasing and getting that out. And the podcast and my work is about being able to kind of allow people, I think it's confidence building, and that's the main thing, allowing people to understand actually that if you give yourself an opportunity, then you can literally achieve exactly what it is. And I don't mean, you see some of them out there and they kind of go, "Yeah, if you do this with me, by the end of the month, you'll have a £6 million house, in the Florida Keys." But it's not about that. This is completely about being able to, have the confidence to just put pen to paper, or just to start the ball rolling with something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah, I love your podcast. It just feels so I suppose in a way that, in the same way that your art has a certain aesthetic, and your podcast does too. There's just like a nice, gentle, feel good. I like it. I'm a fan.
Oh,
I
well,
will
that's
of
just
course link it below. But yeah, it's great that you've got that diversity in what you do. That you've got the art, but also the support for other creatives. And it totally works whether you're in a different creative sphere as well. I get a lot from what you put out there.
Well, I think that is the case, isn't it? That we see a lot of people see art as kind of different segments, and so they kind of go, oh well, I work as I do glass art, I work as a ceramicist, I'm a painter, I'm a writer, and they separate everything, but actually when it comes down to it, we're all doing the same thing. We all have this kind of urge inside of us, and whether that comes out and translates as written word or as a painted picture, it doesn't matter, and it's about it's all an art form, and it's all about having the confidence to be able to push forward with it.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're working, well, actually, before I ask that, for other artists and illustrators who might be watching this, aside from sort of having the confidence to go for it, what would be your tips for someone who wants to start putting their work out there?
One of the first things is, it's a bit of a contradiction, but I would have said, find your style, but also don't worry about it. So bear with me. People put so much weight, I think, on having an absolutely perfect, distinguishable style. And it is really important that you have something that you kind of go, oh, I recognize her work or his work and that kind of thing. And that's great. But I think the main thing to start off is to strive towards it. Don't put too much pressure, because it can take a while. So by starting off, just draw, or however it is you illustrate. I guess a lot of people now do it on the iPad things. I don't know what they use actually, but whatever it is, whatever medium you use, is to just go forward and practice. It can be anything, in however you feel like you need to be working, and that then will start to progress, and you'll find that you naturally, just by accident, will fall into a type. And a lot of your work, you can flick through your sketchbook and you'll find that you're working, and it's like, oh, they all look quite similar. I think I'm doing this a lot because I enjoy this. And you'll start to find out that what it is you enjoy, you're much better at. And then, of course, you can find your style. So I would say strive for finding a style, but don't put too much pressure on finding it within a week, because it's not going to happen. It can happen immediately. And actually, the more relaxed you are about it and the less pressure you put on yourself, the quicker you'll find it. With that, you've got... it's really, really important then to not compare to anybody else, because it's so easy. I mean, I do it now. Everybody does it, I suppose, that's in the creative kind of field. You will produce something that you love, and then you look at somebody else's work, which can be completely different, and think, well, mine looks nothing like that. And of course it doesn't look anything like that. But young in the sense of young in the profession, new artists are hypercritical. I mean, we're all, as creatives, we're all really critical of our own work. But I know they will kind of go, well, I love this sort of style, I want to do that. And then they'll start, and that's fantastic. But you need to then kind of go off on your own tangent instead of copying what it is that you love, because otherwise what they do is they end up comparing their kind of chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 20. And it's not something that's going to kind of balance up. So find your style, and then make sure you don't compare. And whether that is cutting yourself off from social media for a little bit, or at least restricting it in the days, because otherwise you'll find yourself kind of flying through everybody else's, oh, it doesn't look like that yet, but it will, and the more you can practice it, and the more you can have kind of confidence is a really kind of important kind of part of it. Knowing your worth as well, I think, is a really critical part of being an artist, because the idea of we're all poor artists and we sit in a corner in the dark, smoking long cigarettes.
I am quite literally sitting in a corner in the dark, it looks like.
I'm right next to a window. It would be really dark otherwise. But we've got that kind of that idea that there's a definite stereotype, which I'm not helping in paint comes with overalls. But it's about knowing your work, and having that confidence to kind of go, all right, you know, I am at the beginning, I am going to push forward. It's not going to look like that yet, but I'm going to just work on kind of trying to focus in to the things I love and the things, the subjects that you enjoy. Because if you're, you know, if you're trying to draw perspective or some buildings and yet you hate it, you'd rather be doing trees, then just focus on kind of on the trees. And I think as well as that, if you're a little bit further along, so you've got your style and you know what it is that you how you work, then make sure you're present a lot of the time. And this is the same thing as we chatted about on about social media, that you're going to be there and be present, but don't try and be something else. So I think the best way, because I guess in the idea of lies will always catch up with you, if you're on social media and you are transparent with things, then people really connect with you as well. And there's a lovely, do you know Simon Sinek?
No.
He does a lot of TED Talk. He's amazing, well worth having a look at. But Simon Sinek has, he said this quote, which always stood with me. And it's called, the way he says it is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. That is, even though we don't just create art to make a load of money, obviously, it's, you know, it's more about kind of people buy into you as an individual and your loves and your kind of quirks and the different things and even the mistakes. If you can put those up and show people and you're transparent with it, then your audience, which I guess is what it's all about, your audience will increase so quickly. And you can then kind of go.
And I think all of that is true for, again, any kind of creative. There's so much that's, whoever you are and whatever creative outlet you have, that there is sort of all these commonalities between the different art forms, I guess. So I think those are useful tips for anyone. One thing I wanted to ask you today is, lots of people who watch this channel are authors, and particularly independent authors. And I know that when I was working on Milk and Cookies, trying to find an illustrator was so hard. And there are so many horror stories out there of people who've found an amazing illustrator and then they don't finish the work, or it's not as was expected, and kind of horrible things that happen. And I mean, my experience was just that I was overwhelmed. You kind of, say for example, if I was looking for an editor, there's the Chartered Institute of Editors and Proofreaders, so I can go on there, find somebody, and it feels easier. Whereas looking for an artist is sort of, there's just so much choice of what do I want, and then a lot of artists seem to be, my dog is panting in the background, I'm sorry if you can hear that. I want to move her out of the sun, she's having too much of a nice time. Yeah, a lot of illustrators and artists seem to be represented by agents, and then it's really hard to find out if they're available. It just felt difficult. So I'd love to know your thoughts on how to find an illustrator and how to find a reliable illustrator as well, because you are one. So I feel like you're a good to ask.
Yeah, I think it can be a minefield because there's so much choice out there. And I guess, I don't know whether it was the same for you, but did you have an idea in your head as the kind of style you wanted, or were you just kind of looking for something that resonated with you?
I definitely wanted a watercolor, quite a vibrant, and I really didn't want digital art. It's something I would consider in the future, but for Milk and Cookies, I specifically wanted something that was hand-drawn and had that lovely sort of translucent almost feel of watercolor. So, and I was struggling to find people that fitted that. And actually, the way that I found you was through another writer who'd worked with you, because then I felt that, well, I knew that you had done the work for her. So I knew that, you know, there was, I suppose it would be easy for somebody to have, say, references on their website saying how wonderful they are, but to have actually seen the finished product from somebody else kind of gave me the confidence to invest in you. And I just think it is really hard for children's book illustrators, writers to find illustrators to take that leap of faith, because it is a lot of money in the publishing process that you invest in the illustrator, and rightfully so, because that's what sells your book, to be fair. You know, people pick it up because of the artwork. But it's scary, I think.
and I think it's a strange one, because even though I guess it's all it's a professional process, there's a massive amount of trust that has to go into it as well, which is a strange one. I mean, even though we have I work always with a contract, and a lot of the time it's never, if I work with an author, I've got a feel for that person originally because we've maybe chatted by email or on the phone. So the contract then kind of protects both of us from any kind of plagiarism or if the art being kind of taken. But I think understanding that there's going to be a contract, and I don't know whether a lot of most authors work with those. Most illustrators do, at least, and it'll protect the author as well.
Yeah.
From obviously any wrongful artist kind of taking the money and and doing a run-up. But I think there is a lot of trust in the process, and I guess the main thing is when you're starting out is to look for a style that resonates with you. So if you have a really specific idea of the kind of thing you want, that can be good, but it can also be really bad. Because I think as long as you've got a rough idea, then you can filter through things quite quickly to the styles that that you love. Like you said about watercolor, so you'd filter out all of the digital work or a lot of the data.
Would you look on Instagram? Would you look,
Yeah, I would. I love kind of bigging up the new illustrators, because a lot of them as well are starting out and they're so passionate about it. So it's a case of they'll do anything to help to make sure these are perfect, because it means a lot to them, and I find that lovely. So it's always better, I guess, in my head at least anyway, to go for individuals. And if they don't have, like you were saying about the having an agent, I don't have an agent as an illustrator. I did have one as an artist, but I've kind of moved away from that because I don't feel that it's necessary anymore for me. But having an idea is great when you do have a look through things like Facebook and Instagram, because like you've seen on my profile, I put everything out there, and you can kind of flick through everything there. And a lot of the time you can see the little bits as well which don't make it to the website. So they're not the pristine, perfect things. You can see the process and you can get a feel for the individual, because it's really important that you connect well with the individual as well. Yeah. If you're not on the same wavelength, then somehow you can have your write-up and what it is exactly you need, but there can be this disconnect as well. And then you're not going to have the work, or you're not going to feel like you can then approach the artist and say, do you know what, I'm not sure about that part, or can we change that to this? And that's really important. I'm not saying or suggesting you have to be best friends with every single person you work with, but it's good to be able to have that kind of connection. And then at the same time, then if you do go into it, and I have in the past worked with authors, and they've all been lovely, I've been really, really lucky, but some of them have been so focused on exactly what it is they want that you kind of think, well, I'm not sure I'm the right person for you, because then if you're going to go into a contract or into a process with an illustrator, and you're too focused on what you think you want in your head, you're not going to allow the illustrator to do the job properly. Yeah. So I think that's another thing as well. It is a scary scenario, and there is an element of trust, but if you do love the work that they've done, then you'll have to kind of trust that they will produce the same kind of thing for you. And I would suggest that an author looking for an illustrator, the illustrator should be constant in their kind of communication with you. So updating you was never an issue. Like you could always message me via I think we was quite formal on email, and then it was just Instagram back and forth, because that a lot of the time is easier, and we can
now it's sending each other pictures and memes.
There's Lord of the Rings on. Yeah. But I think you can do that, and an illustrator should always be open to a request for how are things going, because we know what we've got to do on this end, and once you've written your book, it's a case of, well, here's the information, here's kind of what I want, and then we could then spend months in silence, kind of just radio silence, and just getting on with it. But that, I imagine, that is probably terrifying for an author, because you don't know how things are progressing. So an illustrator should be more than happy to be kind of, no problem at all, I'll just send you a sneaky kind of pic. Sometimes we don't send them in between, only because I know I can be creating an image, and if you wanted to see it halfway through, I'm thinking, well, that doesn't look like it's going to be. And I know in my head I was going to turn out, but you might have a panic attack seeing this because it doesn't look great, and that's kind of the process. But they should at least be able to be sort of there, present, saying, yeah, no problem, I'll say, I'll just finish off this part and I'll show you what I'm doing, or just have that conversation going.
I
To
think
kind of,
you're right. The communication, I
yeah,
hadn't really thought about it that way, although I think that's what I was doing. That because you weren't the only illustrator that I contacted when I was looking. Of course, I got quotes from a few people so that I could weigh up, you know, different styles, different options, and all of those kind of things. However, the communication I had with you, that it's that kind of gut feeling, isn't it? There's something that you can't put your finger on that says this is the right choice for this piece of work. And
yeah,
I think if somebody's a little bit suspicious in some way, I almost think you can tell that this isn't
yeah,
going to work or something's not quite right. But I think that the contract as well is a really good point. And I think it's very important. And I think that it's also always okay to ask if you haven't got that contract in place, because, you know, it protects both of us. It protects your work. It stops me from just making whatever I want out of your art. And at the same time, perhaps you taking parts of the book that I didn't want you to, or, you know, it just protects both of our use of that work. And then there have been times where I've contacted you and said, would it be okay if I used the images to do this? And then, you know, that's then something that's agreed and we're both happy with. I think that's important.
yeah. And I think that is the case, isn't it? Because when, and a lot of the time as well with a contract, I mean, you know, we sort of wouldn't necessarily need a contract now because we know we're not going to mess about each other. I mean, but we would do, because other than the process, I suppose it's a case of, especially if you're working with an illustrator for the first time, it's lovely to kind of go, do you know, I can, you know, even if you are kind of, a lot of the time, I guess the author is sat not literally in the dark, but we are cracking on with our work, so we know what we're doing and everything is kind of going well. But you're then sat there, or the author sat there kind of going, well, I don't know, have they started it, have they done anything? And that contract then has got the time scale on it, and you know, the you know, that there's also, especially in mine, that it does kind of specify that it'll be to a standard that is agreed as well, you know, and that any kind of alterations can be changed, and it's not then going to cost you a fortune. So I guess it gives you a little bit more peace of mind to kind of think, well, I know that we're contracted into this, they will be done.
Mm-hmm.
There is a standard to adhere to as well, so it just makes you feel a little bit better, because
And
there is going to be little happy
if we get to a certain point and it falls apart for whatever reason, you know, let's say with Milk and Cookies, that the Kickstarter hadn't happened and I'd have just had to pull the plug, what your fees are at each specific stage for the amount of work that you've completed. And actually with the changes side of things as well, because I know that there was a minor change that I asked you for, and I remember I looked at it and I was thinking, because I think you practically finished, and I was like, oh no, I can't ask her to, but because we had good communication, I felt able to say, is this possible? And you were like, yeah, no problem, of course I can, and just made a little alteration. It's like, oh, okay, you know, I didn't need to panic about this, but also we had that contract in place that protected you to have a clause saying, well, actually, this is, you know, this is the process, and this is, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's the case as well, isn't it? That when we're working, and I mean, from an illustrator perspective, I don't kind of go, yeah, well, here's the job, there's the money, thanks very much, and push it away. I'm interested. Like if I take on a book, then I'm interested in that book in the long run, you know, and I like to see it kind of do well. So I don't want to just, you know, put anything out there. And then again, when you came to me, a lot of the time, I think because we are different from, you know, illustrators and writers, I don't know how the brain of a writer works, the same as I guess that writers don't understand the brain of an artist works, you know. But a lot of the time there's things that they kind of go, oh, do you know, could I change this little thing? And it might seem like a major thing. Mm-hmm. It's actually maybe, you know, easy to change, but even if it wasn't, it's a case of I want you to be happy, and to kind of look at it. And otherwise what's going to happen is, especially for me, if I know that you're not happy with one particular thing, every time I open that book, it'll remind me. And I think, oh, you know, I had a woman, an author I was working with before, and we worked on a set of illustrations and everything was fine. And then there was one in particular, which was something that there was two options. I can't go too far into it yet because it's not published yet, but there was two options for this particular thing, and she's brilliant. So it was like, yeah, whatever you think. And the final piece looked, that looked fine. The page looked absolutely fine. There wasn't an issue. And in fact, I know my husband kind of looked over my shoulder and said, I love that. It's, it's something that's right up his kind of street. And she saw it. She was like, and I just knew. She was like, oh yeah, fantastic, thank you. And I thought, no, that's not right. But there's something there. What is the matter? What is, and she didn't want to, she liked it, but for her, she envisaged something else. But again, I think hadn't, because she hadn't felt like she could tell me, because I'm the artist, so to speak, it was different, but it was something that was similar. I said, well, I'm gonna start it again, it's fine. And she was kind of, I think she felt mortified, like, no, I don't want you to start the page. But it's a case of going, I don't mind, this is my job. So actually that's fine, you can have that one anyway if you wanted to. But the colors, if you imagine them in a different way, that's absolutely fine, because I want it to be, it's your vision, it's your book. I'm kind of just helping to kind of put the jigsaw together. And the end result then was something that she absolutely loved. So she did say, but I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine, it's just me being picky. And I thought, well, it has to be perfect for you.
I get that.
I think, so it's important as well for an author to say, if they do have this idea, and it could be so small, like, I know this sounds really random, but can you make the trees autumn colors instead of summer colors? It won't necessarily make a difference to the look to anybody else reading it, but if it's important to the author, then just be really transparent with everything that you fancy, because the artist will never mind, ever.
Mine was adding a sleeve. Could you add a sleeve? And you were like, yeah, of course.
I need a sleeve, right? I remember the bit.
It's a good point to lead on, perhaps, to what information is good for a writer to provide, because I think I sent you the manuscript of Milk and Cookies with notes about, this character is perhaps this age. Like, if I had in my head, even, they look like this, they wear this, or on this page I'd really like it to include this specific thing. But from your side of things, what information do you like to have?
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked with authors that are really specific as to exactly what they want, which is fantastic. Sometimes to the point where you kind of feel like you need to kind of give them a little shake and say, just trust me, I know what I'm doing, it's okay. I can do it, I've got this. I've worked with authors that have kind of gone, yeah, whatever you feel like, and have given me rein over it. And that's terrifying, because you think, well, I guess this is then right. So as an illustrator, it's great to have, obviously we need to read the story, but if you can, as an author, if you can put the page breaks where you want an image to start off with, so we kind of know in our heads how it's going to be structured, because a lot of the time, if I know there's going to be writing in the top right hand corner, then I know then to make the image kind of give it space, because there's nothing worse than having to kind of almost like erase from your perspective, or in a digital kind of manner, to take chunks out of it so that you can then add the writing, and of course that then changes the artwork. So the more
that needs permission, right?
Yeah, I think from a change in the artwork, other than what happens in the normal printing process, I think is how it's kind of said. If you're taking chunks out there, it could then change the overall look of the page, and the artist might be mortified because it suddenly then doesn't balance, or it doesn't work, or make sense. So give them as much information as you can from the perspective of where you're planning roughly to put the writing. But if you have an idea in your head, like you did with the characters, I have this idea, she's going to be this old, she's going to wear this color, preferably. They live in a house, they have even silly things like they love animals, they live on a farm. You might not ever have the outside of that farm shown, but the illustrator can then in their head kind of think, right, well, I'm just going to put like a little horseshoe over the door, or I'm going to put this and this, and it's suggestive of where they live. And those little tiny things, I guess, are the subconscious bits that we absorb, and so the reader and the audience is going to get a much bigger idea. And I've always kind of said that give me as much information as you possibly can. It doesn't make a difference how irrelevant you think it is. So it could be that she I don't know, like to jump up and down on a bed a lot. So of course then the bed might be messy in the image, even in the background, because we are striving as illustrators to create to basically pull out what's in your head and put it down on paper. So it'll have our style, but your vision. And that's the kind of way you want to meld it kind of together,
I love that on Milk and Cookies, you actually took sketches that my daughter had drawn, which she had done of sketches I had done, and little elements of that character that I'd sort of come up with, but then she'd become really fixated. I wasn't that bothered about this character anymore, but she was like, no, this is how they have to look. And Milk and Cookies has also got little touches, like the toy that Tilly is holding is actually my daughter's toy, that like her favorite little bedtime toy. And you wrote the titles of my books on the bookcase, and there's just like cute little touches and little personal things that are really lovely, and it was only possible through communication. But yeah, I think I sent you, what was weird that we should perhaps mention is I held back on sharing anything that I had drawn, because I tried to illustrate this book myself and realized that I shouldn't. And so I'd sent you perhaps some bits from Pinterest, and some of the things that my daughter had drawn and that kind of thing. And then when you sent me, I think it was the sketches, I then sent you the things I had drawn, and they were practically the same. And it was so weird. Yeah. But it goes to show that I had obviously managed to communicate what was in my head, but you'd managed to figure that out, which was remarkable.
Yeah, and I think that is because they were the giraffes, and then the house, I think, was really similar, wasn't it? The kind of the cottage with the door. But I think that a lot of that comes from, it's not a case of necessarily being really intuitive, but it's a case of connecting with the author. So if you've got a really good connection, and I think you'll have that, you'll get a feel for somebody even through the emails. I mean, the start of the process will always be a little bit more formal, and that will kind of drop away then as time progresses, hopefully, because then you become a lot more friendly, and that way then you can connect better. And I think it's the little tiny bits, like she loves this and she does that, and this is her family group, and all the different things we would have talked about gives the illustrator this feeling. And it's a really strange one. It is just literally a feeling. And I guess that then, well, even we might not add a lot of the things that you've been sort of the outside things you've been saying, in our heads, we know exactly what it is, what the scene looks like, the wider picture, I suppose. And so, of course, when we're then creating what it is that you've asked for, I guess it just translates. So it's the more you can give. And I always kind of say, even if you think it's irrelevant, I don't care how irrelevant you think it is, just write it down, bombard me with lists and lists and lists of stuff. It doesn't matter, you know, they don't tend to watch TV a lot, you know, or something like this, which may just be a feel of what you have for the characters in your head, and is never mentioned in the story. But for me, then I can then maybe think, okay, so there'll be a big bookshelf. There'll be little things like this. And then it kind of, that then becomes your idea in my style in the book.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's nerve-wracking as the writer to see the final pieces, and that it's the fear of like, oh God, what if I hate them? Or what if there's some, you know, it's just, and I'm quite an anxious person anyway. I mean, you might remember that when you sent the artwork to me, I had a whole thing on Instagram where I couldn't open the box and all this because I didn't want to touch it. Even though I'd seen the sketches, you'd sent me all sorts of things throughout the whole process, so I knew what I was getting, but there was just the fear. But yeah, at the same time, it's also thrilling to see the words that you'd written come to life. And that's one of the wonderful things about children's books as opposed to adults' books. It's that sort of visual side of things is lovely. And I can't say too much, but we're going to work on a new project together soon. So we've just started talking to each other about a coastal project. So
I think it's right up our streets, isn't it? Both of us, something we're really passionate about. So
yeah, I love that when I messaged you, again, it's that communication thing, that instead of maybe like a professional, not say you were unprofessional, but like a professional, like, oh yes, it's very formal, you were like, I love it, yes, and ideas. And so yeah, and that's what makes me think, yeah, you're the right person. Okay, great.
Well, I think that is the thing, because I think I said to you, we were chatting on you know, we sending kind of messages back and forth, and it's a case of some of the kind of the formal stuff that we needed to kind of clean up. It's like, right, I'll send you on an email, so ignore the way I sound, because it's going to sound like, oh hi Emma, hope you're having a lovely day. You know, it's the normal kind of things, because that's all for the books that we all keep. But in between, you know, we've got that kind of lovely kind of friendship, and we can work then in a book. And I think that's really important as well. And sometimes you will you know, you're going to have times where you're going to click with the author or the illustrator, and then there's going to be times where you're not, because you may be completely different. But as long as you do have that understanding and you're comfortable enough, I think and especially it's really important that if you kind of hold back and say you've seen someone's progress, and you think, oh, I don't like that, I'm not sure, I'll just be quiet, I won't say anything, and then you're worried by the time the end comes, the illustrator might be there saying, why didn't you tell me at the beginning? I could have completely changed it for you. So that you know, that honesty is a massive thing, because an illustrator will never ever mind you saying, actually, is it okay if I, and if they do, then they may not be the one to be working with, you know, because a lot of the time, as long as they're excited, and you know, the author's going to be excited about their work, and the illustrator is going to be excited to work on that book, or you'd never have come together in the first place, you know.
And it is going to be really exciting. I can't wait to share more. It really is in its early stages, which is why we can't say too much, but it's going to be fun. Is there any other sort of, I mean, if you were a writer, I'd be asking sort of what books have you got in the works, but is there any sort of future projects you can share or want to share?
I'm working on a lovely, I finished actually, so that's in the process of being kind of sorted out, that's the official term. I don't know what the authory kind of term is, right? I guess going through the process of editing and bits and pieces. And that one is about, it's based on a different kind of, on a different planet, but it's kind of for, I think, 7-year-olds, that kind of age bracket, and it's got beautiful endangered animals. So that's where the endangered animals go to survive, and it's a really wonderful kind of world. There's a lot of there's a lot of messages in there about kind of preservation and the environment, any issues and things. So that's lovely. Later on in the year, I think there's going to be a book about a little bunny rabbit. So that's really cool. So I'm looking forward to that. And then from an art perspective, I've just finished the Icelandic series, and I was going to start on 3 new pieces, which is inspired by Ukraine. Okay. But then yesterday, the last couple of days, I've started doing something else, and I've got sucked into a completely different one. So I'm still going to do that, but I'm back in Cornwall mentally. I need those kind of beigey sands and turquoise seas just for a little bit.
I'm with you. Yeah. Oh, that all sounds really interesting. And I imagine that people will be able to find all of those things as they are coming into reality on your social media.
Yeah. I mean, every final kind of item is on my website. But to be quite honest, I always find that almost the most boring part of the process, you know, the end piece, you know. So if Instagram, especially, I think I work most heavily on Instagram, because that allows me to kind of to show the process more than anything else does. So I'm also useless at saving them. So I've got the stories are the one to kind of to check. So everything's on there, what I'm doing in the day and how they look. And I try and take a lot of photographs of up close, because sometimes when you see a finished piece, you can't then see all the texture on it. And that's kind of criminal sometimes, because you think, well, the whole point of these pieces is they're really deep and they're textured. And I love when people see them. It's so funny, because they go up to them and they go, oh no. It's fine. I make them so that they're pretty industrial, and you know, you can feel them and touch them, and that's kind of part of the process, that there's these soils and earths and different pigments from all over the country.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do an immersive kind of experience. I don't stop my kids, unless they've got chocolate in their hands. I don't stop the kids from coming in and touching them. They know to be gentle, because I think that's how they learn as well, you know. And that's, I don't know why we're told when we start to grow up, where they kind of say, don't touch, don't touch. And instead of kind of be gentle, we're kind of told there's that disconnect. So for me, it's a case of, you know, get involved in them. And I quite like kids being able to do that. And I'd like to be able to do an exhibition at some point with pieces for children, like down low on the floor, so they can reach them and they can just get their hands involved, and you know, because that's how we learn. So.
I love that, and I will obviously link your website and your social media and everything below. But yeah, Instagram, I think, is the place to follow you and see throughout the day, and links to all of your stuff. So yeah, but thank you so much for talking to me today, and we'll be announcing something. I don't know when, but it's exciting. So, but yeah.
I'm struggling. I'm struggling to keep quiet. People keep asking me, and
Thank you. It's been so lovely. Take care.
brilliant.